The secession of the Southern states in 1860 to 1861 and the ensuing outbreak of armed hostilities were the culmination of decades of growing sectional friction over slavery. Between 1815 and 1861 the economy of the northern states was rapidly modernizing and diversifying. Although agriculture, mostly smaller farms that relied on free labor, remained the dominant sector in the North, industrialization had taken root there. Moreover, Northerners had invested heavily in an expansive and varied transportation system that included canals, roads, steamboats, and railroads. In financial industries such as banking and insurance, and in a large communications network that featured inexpensive, widely available newspapers, magazines, and books, along with the telegraph. By contrast, the Southern economy was based principally on large farms that produced commercial crops such as cotton and that relied on slaves as the main labor force. Rather than invest in factories or railroads as Northerners had done, Southerners invested their money in slaves, even more than in land. On December 20, 1860, a special convention called in South Carolina unanimously passed an ordinance of secession. Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, and Louisiana followed in January, and Texas voted to secede on February 1, 1861, still more than a month before Lincoln was actually inaugurated. President James Buchanan denied the right of secession, but he also denied the right of the federal government to use force against the seceded states. In the early morning hours of April 12, 1861, rebels opened fire on Fort Sumter, at the entrance to the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina. Curiously, this first encounter of what would be the bloodiest war in the history of the United States claimed no victims. After a 34-hour bombardment, Major Robert Anderson surrendered his command of about 85 soldiers to some 5,500 besieging Confederate troops. Within weeks, 4 more Southern states left the Union to join the Confederacy. By early 1861, General Winfield Scott had devised the Anaconda Plan to win the war with as little bloodshed as possible. In April 1861, Lincoln announced the Union blockade of all Southern ports, commercial ships could not get insurance and regular traffic ended. As a result the South could export less than 10% of its cotton. To fight an offensive war, the Confederacy purchased ships in Britain, converted them to warships, and raided American merchant ships in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. The 1862 Union strategy called for simultaneous advances along 4 axes. 1. McClellan would lead the main thrust in Virginia towards Richmond. 2. Ohio forces would advance through Kentucky into Tennessee. 3. The Missouri Department would drive south along the Mississippi River. 4. The westernmost attack would originate from Kansas. After 4 years of bloody conflict, finally, on April 9, 1865, the Army of Northern Virginia surrendered. On April 14, 1865, President Lincoln was shot by John Wilkes Booth, a Southern sympathizer. Lincoln died early the next morning. Lincoln's vice president, Andrew Johnson, was unharmed as his would-be assassin, George Atzerodt, lost his nerve, so he was immediately sworn in as president. Meanwhile, Confederate forces across the South surrendered as news of Lee's surrender reached them. On April 26, 1865, the same day Boston Corbett killed Booth at a tobacco bar. President Johnson officially declared an end to the insurrection on May 9, 1865. Confederate President, Jefferson Davis, was captured the following day. By June 23 all remaining Confederate forces surrendered. The war resulted in at least 1,030,000 casualties, including about 620,000 soldier deaths, 2/3 by disease, and 50,000 civilians. Based on 1860 census figures, 8% of all white men aged 13 to 43 died in the war, including 6% in the North and 18% in the South. About 56,000 soldiers died in prison camps during the war. An estimated 60,000 men lost limbs in the war. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel.